Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling a really pressing question. Is anti-Semitism actually rising globally?
It certainly feels that way based on the reports we're seeing.
Yeah, exactly. We've gathered quite a range of sources for this exploration. We've got detailed reports from groups like the Anti-Defamation League, government stats from places like France and Germany, some academic studies, and also some really, really powerful personal stories.
And our goal here isn't just, throwing numbers around. It's about trying to grasp the reality behind these, frankly, alarming reports.
Right, because this isn't new, is it?
No, absolutely not. Anti-Semitism has this long, tragic history. The Holocaust, obviously, was a terrible low point, and there were real efforts towards tolerance after the war.
But the concern now is that maybe, just maybe, we're seeing a kind of resurgence, a serious one.
That's the fear, that this age-old hatred is finding new footing.
Okay. So for you listening, our mission today is pretty clear. We want to understand the scale of this, explore the complex things driving it, and importantly, think about what possible responses look like.
Right. Let's start with the evidence. What does the data actually show?
Okay, the evidence. It seems pretty consistent across different regions, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. If we look at the U.S., the ADL, that's the Anti-Defamation League, their data shows a worrying trend. They flagged a big jump, 20% back in 2020, but it didn't stop there. By 2022, they recorded nearly 3,700 incidents. That's a 36% increase from the year before.
36%. Wow.
And what's really concerning is the preliminary data for 2024, just halfway through the year, and they're already looking at over 4,000 recorded cases.
That's a really steep climb. And the ADL mentions specific things like synagogue vandalism, online hate driving those numbers.
Yes, exactly. Those were key drivers. And like you said earlier, these aren't just statistics. Each one represents something real happening to someone.
Absolutely. And Europe, is the picture similar there?
Unfortunately, yes, very similar. In France, the first half of 2023 alone saw 436 reported anti-Semitic acts. That was a huge 74% jump from the same time the year before.
74%, goodness.
And Germany, also troubling figures, their federal criminal police reported over 2,200 incidents in 2023, which is up 15% from 2022.
It paints a picture of growing fear, I imagine, within Jewish communities there.
Definitely. It's not just numbers. It's about feeling safe, or perhaps unsafe.
And it's easy to get lost in these figures, but yeah, each one is a person, a family, a community feeling that impact.
Is this wider than just the U.S. and Europe?
It seems so. There was a 2021 study in Australia. Monash University found 20% of Jewish students reported experiencing anti-Semitism at school.
20%, 1 in 5.
Yeah. And even in Israel, which many might think of as a safe haven, the police reported a 45% rise in hate crimes in 2023. Now, that was directed at both Jews and Palestinians, which highlights the really complex dynamics there. Right, it's not always straightforward. And we're not just talking about, say, graffiti or nasty comments online, right? Some of the incidents mentioned were incredibly violent.
Tragically, yes. The Pittsburgh synagogue shooting in 2018, where 11 people were killed, that's a horrific reminder of the potential for deadly violence.
Still so shocking to think about.
It is. And more recently, you have things like the desecration of Jewish cemeteries in France in 2024. It just underscores the persistence of this hatred. These awful events really bring the statistical trends into sharp, terrible focus.
So, okay, we see the evidence, the numbers, these awful events. The big question then is why? What's fueling this? What are the sort of driving forces behind this apparent rise?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's complex. Our sources point to several things working together. One big factor seems to be the rise of nationalist and populist movements.
We saw mentions of like the National Rally in France, Fidesz in Hungary. How exactly do they contribute? Is it direct targeting?
It's often more subtle but damaging. These movements tend to build this idea of us versus them. They define the nation in a way that excludes certain groups. And historically, Jewish communities have often been scapegoated, blamed for problems.
Right. The other?
Exactly. So even if the rhetoric isn't always explicitly anti-Semitic, it creates a climate, an atmosphere, where those old prejudices can resurface and feel, well, permissible, normalized even.
That makes a scary kind of sense. You draw those lines and old biases find new energy. Another factor mentioned was economic uncertainty. We've certainly seen plenty of that globally.
Absolutely. The World Bank noted global inflation peaked around 8.7% in 2022. When people feel economically anxious, stressed about money, they often look for someone to blame.
And history shows that Jewish people have often been that target.
Tragically, yes. It's an old, baseless prejudice going back centuries, blaming Jews for financial troubles. When times get tough economically, those vile ideas can sadly gain traction again.
It's like these toxic ideas lie dormant and then just get reactivated in times of stress. And, of course, we have to talk about social media.
Oh, definitely. Social media is a huge piece of this puzzle today. Platforms like, well, X, TikTok, they've become breeding grounds for conspiracy theories, for hate.
The ADL found, what, 20 million anti-Semitic posts on X in 2023?
20 million just on that one platform. It's a staggering volume, and it shows this isn't just some fringe element. It's reaching huge audiences.
Is that number significantly up? How does it compare?
While the sources didn't give a direct year-on-year comparison for that specific number, the sheer scale of 20 million strongly suggests a major problem. And it's not just volume, it's the type of content. We're seeing old, horrible myths like the blood libel revived online alongside constant Holocaust denial.
Awful stuff. And there was mention of hate groups specifically using algorithms.
Yes, that's particularly insidious. They've figured out how to target people who might be vulnerable. They package anti-Semitic tropes with maybe other populist grievances, use certain hashtags.
Like the hashtag Jewish conspiracy one?
Exactly. The Institute for Strategic Dialogue found that hashtag got millions of views. They're essentially gaming the system, using the platform's own mechanisms to spread hate and recruit.
So what are the platforms doing? Are they trying to stop this?
Well, they say they are. Companies like Meta, YouTube, they report removing millions of pieces of hate content. Meta deleted, I think, 18.3 million in just the first quarter of 2024.
That sounds like a lot.
It does, but the criticism is about how fast and how effectively they act. Some reports suggest only a tiny percentage, maybe like 0.6% of reported hateful content gets acted on quickly.
So the hate spreads much faster than it gets taken down.
That's the concern. There's this lag, and we know there's a link between this kind of online rhetoric and actual offline violence.
It feels like a constant losing battle sometimes. Another major factor that came up repeatedly is the political situation in the Middle East.
Yes, and this is obviously a very sensitive and complex driver. The Hamas attack on October 7th, 2023, and the subsequent war in Gaza with the incredibly high Palestinian death toll, over 35,000 by May 2025, according to UN estimates, that's had a huge global impact.
Huge polarization.
Exactly. And unfortunately, that polarization often spills over into anti-Semitism. The ADL reported that massive spike, 337%, in U.S. anti-Semitic incidents right after the October 7th attack.
337%. That's just astronomical.
It is. And the really dangerous thing here is how criticism of Israeli government policies, which can be legitimate political discourse, gets conflated with or used as a cover for outright anti-Jewish hatred.
Blurring those lines.
Precisely. Targeting Jewish people or institutions anywhere in the world who have absolutely nothing to do with the conflict itself. It's a vital distinction to make, but one that often gets lost.
A really difficult but crucial distinction. And finally, the sources looped back to economic instability, specifically thinking about now May 2025.
Yes. Beyond just the general inflation point earlier. Right now, you've got, say, U.S. unemployment around 4.2%, rising global trade tensions. History teaches us that economic downturns can be fertile ground for scapegoating.
Like the 1930s.
Exactly. The Great Depression, 1930s Germany, economic hardship fueled anti-Semitism then. And disturbingly, we're seeing echoes today. Fringe groups online are pushing things like the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, again, this fabricated text, blaming Jewish financiers for inflation or other current economic problems.
It's completely unfounded, of course.
Completely. But it's a dangerous narrative that can find traction when people are struggling and looking for simple answers.
It's chilling, really, how these old poisons find new life. Okay, this is all incredibly sobering. To make it even more real, beyond the stats and trends, the sources included personal stories. The human cost.
Yes, and these stories are so important. They show the real-world impact. Take Sarah Klein, a student at UC Berkeley. In 2023, during a protest about the Gaza conflict, she faced awful harassment called a Zionist pig, swastikas on her dorm door.
Oh my God.
It got so bad she felt she had to leave, transfer schools. And her story isn't isolated. The ADL found campus anti-Semitism reports rose 50% since 2021. The Brandeis Center found a 40% rise in bullying of Jewish students nationwide in 2024.
So her feeling of isolation, of fear, it's widespread.
It reflects a deeply worrying trend on campuses. Places that should be about learning and open debate are becoming hostile environments for some students.
It's awful to feel unsafe in your place of learning. Then there was Rachel Levy in Paris. Her story highlighted physical danger.
It really did. In March 2024, her synagogue was attacked with Molotov cocktails, linked to an extremist group.
Was she hurt?
Thankfully, no, not physically, but the trauma was immense. She ended up relocating, leaving her home and community because she just didn't feel safe anymore.
And this wasn't a one-off attack.
No. France's Interior Ministry reported a 200% increase in attacks on synagogues in 2024. 12 separate incidents. So Rachel's experience, while personal, fits into this terrifying pattern of actual physical threats.
It moves beyond words into direct violence, a very tangible threat. The third story, David Cohen in Sydney, that focused more on the economic side.
That's right, he's a shopkeeper. In 2023, his Jewish identity was revealed online, and then false rumors spread on X about him supporting certain Israeli policies.
And that led to real-world consequences.
Yes, his shop was vandalized, and he faced a boycott. His business suffered significantly. And again, it's part of a trend. The Executive Council of Australian Jewry reported a 25% rise in economic discrimination against Jewish people there in 2024.
So online hate directly impacting someone's livelihood.
Exactly. It shows how quickly digital attacks can translate into real, damaging economic harm.
These stories, they really drive home the human impact, don't they, beyond the numbers? So given all this deeply concerning evidence, what about solutions? Are there paths forward? Ways to push back?
Well, thankfully, yes. Our sources do point to some positive actions and areas of hope. Education is mentioned again and again as absolutely crucial.
Like the German program, Remembrance, Responsibility, Future.
Yes. That program, with its focus on education and remembrance, seems to have had a real impact, linked to maybe a 22% reduction in youth anti-Semitism since 2010. And UNESCO also found a clear link: robust Holocaust education correlates with lower levels of anti-Semitic incidents.
So teaching history, fostering understanding, it actually works.
It seems to make a tangible difference, yes. Community initiatives are also key.
Like the Jewish Community Relations Councils in the U.S.
Right, where they're active, building bridges, advocating. They've seen about a 15% drop in local incidents. Creating safe spaces, fostering dialogue, supporting victims, it matters at the local level.
And legislation, trying to tackle the online hate problem.
That shows some promise, too. Britain's Online Safety Act from 2021, which puts more responsibility on platforms, has reportedly led to an 18% reduction in hate speech on the platforms they monitor.
Okay, so there are things being done, things that seem to be having some positive effect. But the challenges we've discussed, they feel huge.
They are huge. And despite these efforts, there's real concern things could get worse, especially in 2025. We're seeing such intense global polarization, election rhetoric in the U.S., the stalled Middle East peace talks. It creates a volatile atmosphere.
The ADL predicted maybe 5,000 incidents in the U.S. this year.
That's their concerning forecast if things don't change course. And while international cooperation is obviously needed, geopolitical tensions often get in the way of unified global action.
And the tech companies. AI detection.
They're working on it. AI tools tested in 2024 could flag a lot of the obvious hate, maybe 85%. But research, like from MIT, showed they often miss the more subtle coded stuff. So it's a tool, but not a perfect solution. Not yet, anyway.
It really does sound like a race, trying to build defenses while the drivers of this hate seem to be accelerating.
That's a very fair assessment. The evidence we've looked at today is clear. Anti-Semitism is demonstrably rising globally. It's not just random noise, it's a trend.
Driven by that toxic mix of nationalism, economic fear, social media, political conflict.
Exactly, a complex web. And as of today, May 22nd, 2025, the seriousness of this just can't be overstated. It needs urgent, sustained attention.
So for you listening, wrapping this up, what are the main takeaways? What can people actually do?
Well, first, stay informed. Really pay attention to this issue and critically evaluate the information you see. Learn to recognize the signs of hate, not just the obvious swastikas, but coded language, dog whistles, too.
And don't be a bystander.
Absolutely. Speak out when you see or hear it, even when it's uncomfortable. Support education efforts in your own community that promote tolerance and understanding.
Talk to elected officials. Push for better policies.
Yes. Advocate for stronger laws against hate speech, online and offline. And just on a personal level, think about how you can help build a more inclusive, respectful environment in your own life, your own circles.
It really feels like it needs everything. Education, policy, individual action, all working together.
It does. It's a multi-front battle against this rising tide.
Okay, so maybe a final thought to leave everyone with, something to chew on after this deep dive.
Right. Perhaps this. Given how interconnected everything is now, global events, the speed of online information or misinformation. How can we as individuals effectively challenge these really deep-rooted prejudices in a world that seems to be getting more and more polarized?
That is a tough question.
It is. No easy answers, but it's one that needs constant thought, critical engagement, and ultimately a commitment to taking action however we can.